All right, so get ready because we're going deep on this one into a book that might it might completely change how you think about self-improvement.
Yeah.
It's Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fick. And yeah, I know the title.
A little aggressive.
It is a little aggressive, a little in your face, but there's so much more to it than that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And this book was just a monster hit
Huge.
when it came out,
Especially with millennials.
especially with millennials.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it's just such a refreshing take on, how to live a good life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think that's the thing. It doesn't say, perfect life. It's like how to have a good life. So,
Absolutely. It definitely struck a nerve. I think a lot of people were just exhausted with the whole, good vibes only, hustle harder, be happy all the time.
yeah.
And he was just kind of like, nope.
Totally. It's like he throws all that out the window and he's like, look, life is messy.
Yeah.
There's going to be pain. There's going to be struggle. Let's just get real about this and figure out, what's worth caring about.
Totally. That's the heart of it, I think. And that's really what we're going to unpack today in this deep dive.
Mhm.
So those core ideas, and then more importantly, how can you actually use this stuff?
Yeah. And so for me, I think one of the things that tripped me up when I first heard about this book was that whole not giving a feck thing.
Sure.
Because at first I was like, well, isn't that kind of nihilistic? Like,
Yeah.
are you just saying like not care about anything?
Become apathetic.
Yeah.
But that's not it at all. And I think the proof is in the pudding, right? Because he's clearly very passionate about a lot of things,
Mhm.
but it's about where you direct that energy
Right.
and that attention.
Yeah, I think I'm still struggling a bit with like, what does that actually look like in real life?
And think about it this way. Like, you have a limited amount of energy, right? It's like a battery. And as you go through the day, it slowly drains. So are you going to waste that energy on things that don't matter? Things that don't actually align with what you want or what you value or where you want to go?
Okay, so it's like I'm hearing you say it's not about being indifferent to everything, it's about
It's choosing.
yeah.
Choosing.
Yeah, it all.
It's like giving all your flax to the things that really, really matter.
Yes, it's about being selective and deliberate with where you put your energy and your attention.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. And this actually, I think, leads into another big idea from the book, which is this idea of happiness as a side effect.
Okay.
Which, when I first read that, I was like, wait a minute, isn't the whole point of like self-improvement to be happier?
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, I know.
Right.
But his perspective is that directly chasing happiness is actually kind of backwards.
Okay.
It's like you're trying to grab a handful of sand. The harder you squeeze, the more slips through your fingers.
So how do we find it then?
Yeah.
If we're not supposed to like, directly chase it? Well, he believes that happiness is not really this constant state of euphoria. It's not about feeling good all the time. It's about finding that sense of fulfillment and meaning even when things are hard.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like you don't find happiness by sitting on a beach somewhere,
Oh.
sipping cocktails all day, You
Yeah.
find it by working hard on something that you care about and,
Overcoming challenges.
yeah, making a difference even in small ways.
Absolutely. And it's about those little moments of satisfaction and accomplishment when you pursue something meaningful that really aligns with your values, and happiness is kind of like the byproduct
Yeah, it's like the byproduct of that effort.
of that engagement with life.
Okay, so we've talked about being selective with our frex. We've talked about this idea of happiness as a byproduct, not a destination.
Yeah.
There's another pretty, I think, bold idea in the book that I think a lot of people might struggle with at first, and that's this idea that we're not special.
Yeah. The "You're Not Special" chapter
Yeah.
really goes against the grain.
Yeah. It does. It goes against, I think, how a lot of us, especially here in the U.S., are raised,
Totally.
right? Like everyone gets a trophy. You can be anything you set your mind to.
You're a special snowflake.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that sets people up for disappointment because...
Absolutely. Because when you believe that you're just inherently special or entitled to success just because you exist,
Right.
then you're not going to put in the effort
You're not as motivated.
to actually achieve your goals
Right.
because you think you deserve it already.
Right. And I'm starting to see how this not special thing can actually be pretty liberating.
Absolutely.
Because if you let go of that expectation that you're entitled to anything, then you're free to pursue things just because you want to,
Right.
right? Just because they're meaningful.
Because they matter to you.
Yeah, and not because you think you deserve success or,
Yeah, you're owed something.
yeah, you're owed something.
That a
Exactly.
very entitled perspective.
Yeah, and so it's like by letting go of that.
You take your power back.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. It helped you, I think, develop a more realistic perspective
Yes.
of your own strengths and weaknesses, right?
Totally.
It's not about putting yourself down. It's about acknowledging that there are things you're good at and things that you need to work on.
Exactly. And everybody's got those things.
And it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. We all have them.
So not special is really not about being self-deprecating. It's about having like a grounded,
Grounded and realistic.
yeah, view of yourself.
And where you fit in the world.
Yeah, which can actually be really empowering.
Totally. Takes the pressure off of having to be extraordinary all the time. And then you can just focus on being the best version of yourself.
Yeah, and it ties back into, I think, that idea of what we were talking about before, of like choosing what to care about.
Right.
So if you're not so caught up in proving your specialness, you can then focus on the things that actually matter to you. Yeah, that's really helpful. So we've covered not giving a feck. Strategically, happiness is a side effect, this liberating truth of not being special.
What else? What else should we unpack?
Well, so, Manson doesn't shy away from some of the, like, I don't know, the darker, the heavier aspects of life.
Right.
He's very upfront about the fact that suffering is just part of it.
Right, which is not
Not
like
your typical self-help.
Yeah.
Most self-help books, it's all about positive thinking and avoiding pain.
avoid pain at all costs. Yeah.
And he argues that actually that's kind of a recipe for more suffering.
Yeah.
You can't avoid it.
Okay, so what do we do? Just like embrace the suck.
It's not about seeking it out or dwelling in all the negativity. It's more about recognizing that pain and struggle, they're part of life and they can actually teach you something.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How can suffering be a teacher? Because usually I'm just trying to avoid it at all costs.
So you go to the gym, you lift weights.
You're challenging your muscles, you're stressing them, you're breaking them down a little bit, and that's what makes them stronger.
Right.
So life's kind of the same way.
It's like resistance training for life.
Exactly. Those challenges that we face, they force us to grow, to adapt, to be more resilient.
So it's not about avoiding the challenges. It's about choosing the right ones.
Yes.
The ones that are going to make us stronger.
Exactly. Choosing your struggles is one of his big concepts.
Oh, I like that.
We've all got challenges.
Right.
We have some say in which ones we take on.
So it's not about being a masochist
No.
and just seeking out pain. It's about being strategic
Absolutely.
about which battles we're going to fight.
You're not going to go to the gym on the first day and try to lift the heaviest weight.
Right.
Right. You're going to start with what you can handle, what challenges you, but doesn't break you.
Yeah.
Life is the same way.
So find those struggles that align with your values and your goals and what you're actually capable of doing.
Yes.
I love that. That's such a helpful analogy.
It makes it much less daunting, this whole suffering as a teacher thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about needless pain. It's
strategic.
it's strategic. Yeah. Choosing those challenges that are going to help you become the best version of yourself.
Totally. It's interesting, though, how this whole choosing your struggles thing kind of ties into something else that Manson talks about, which is the power of no.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us, myself included, really struggle with saying no.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's at work or social obligations or even just like, favors for family and friends.
Absolutely. It's a skill.
It is.
It takes practice, and it can be really uncomfortable at first, especially if you're kind of a people pleaser.
Totally, yeah. And I know I feel guilty sometimes when I say no.
Sure.
Like I feel like I'm letting people down or I'm being selfish.
I get that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, though. When you say yes to everything, you're saying no to yourself.
Right.
You're saying no to your own needs, to your priorities. Yeah, your own well-being.
Your well-being, your sanity.
Yeah. Wow, that really puts it into perspective.
It's not selfish to set boundaries.
Yeah.
And say no to things that drain you, that don't align with your values.
That's self-care.
It's self-care.
Yeah.
And when you start saying no to those things that don't really matter,
Yeah.
you free up so much time and energy for the things that do matter.
Right. You create space for those meaningful struggles.
Exactly.
The ones that are actually going to help you grow.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're starting to see how all these pieces fit together, right?
Yes.
Being selective with our frux, choosing those struggles, saying no to protect our energy. It's all about being more intentional.
Intentional.
Yeah.
With our lives.
Yes, and that intentionality is really key to another important concept, and this is where values come in.
Okay, we've mentioned values a few times already.
Sure.
But can you talk a little bit more about what Manson means by good values? So good values, in his mind, are those that are reality-based. They're socially constructive, and they're within your control.
So, for example, like Honesty, integrity, hard work, kindness. Those would be considered good values.
Those are all great examples, yeah.
Okay.
They're based on a realistic understanding of the world. They contribute to the well-being of yourself and other people, and they're things that you can actually develop through
Okay.
your actions and choices.
What about things like pleasure, material possessions, popularity?
Right.
Like, are those bad values?
It's not that they're necessarily bad in and of themselves.
Okay.
It's just that they're not really a solid foundation for a fulfilling life
Mm-hmm.
because they're fleeting. They're often based on what other people think.
Yeah, external validation.
Yeah, exactly. And they can lead to feeling kind of empty.
Right. It's like you're building a house on a shaky foundation.
Yeah, exactly.
It might look good for a while, but
Not going to last.
it's not going to last. Yeah.
So he really encourages us to focus on those values that are more enduring, more substantial, that have more meaning, and that are actually within our control.
Okay, that makes sense. So we need to choose our struggles, but we also need to choose our values.
Wisely. Yeah.
Wisely. So how do we actually go about doing that?
That's a really good question. And, it's a process of self-discovery.
Okay.
Taking time to really reflect on what is important to you, what are those principles that you want to guide your life,
Yeah.
what kind of person you want to be.
So do you have any tips for actually because I think this is where people get stuck is how do you figure out what your values actually are?
So he suggests a few exercises in the book that can be helpful.
Okay.
One of them is to imagine you're at your own funeral.
Okay.
What are people saying about you?
Wow. That's heavy.
What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
Yeah. But it makes you think about what matters,
Yeah,
like in the grand scheme of things.
exactly.
Yeah.
Another exercise is to think about a time when you felt really alive, really fulfilled.
Uh-huh.
What were you doing? Who were you with? What values were at play in that moment?
So you're looking for clues in your own experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Trying to identify those times where you felt most like yourself.
Yeah, most aligned with your true self.
Absolutely. And it's an ongoing process. Those values might shift and change over time as you grow and learn.
And that's okay.
That's okay.
It takes the pressure off of having to figure it all out right now.
Yeah.
It's okay to experiment and refine
Absolutely.
your values as you go.
Yeah, and remember, it's not just about figuring out what they are.
Yeah.
It's about living in alignment with them,
Yeah.
making choices each day that reflect what you believe in.
Yeah. So if one of my values is kindness, for example, then I might, make an effort to do something kind every day or be more patient with people.
Exactly.
It's about putting those values into action.
Yeah, making them a part of your everyday life.
This is so helpful. I'm starting to see how, this book can really be like a blueprint
Yeah.
for living a more intentional life
And fulfilling.
and fulfilling you.
And it's not just about your own personal fulfillment. It's also about having a positive impact on the world around you.
Right, because when you're clear on your values, you're more likely to make choices that benefit not just yourself, but your community
Exactly.
and the world at large.
Absolutely. And I think, speaking of impact on the world, one thing that he also talks about that I think is really interesting
Okay.
is this idea of accepting the reality of death, which is something that most of us try to avoid.
Yeah, we don't want to think about.
Right. But he argues that that can actually make you appreciate life more.
Okay, that's definitely not something you hear in most self-help books.
Right.
But I'm curious, how does that make you appreciate life more?
So think about it. When you're aware of your own mortality, when you really internalize the fact that this is not going to last forever,
Right.
it makes things feel more precious.
Yeah. Yeah, if you knew you only had a limited amount of time left,
Right.
you wouldn't waste it on stuff that doesn't matter.
You wouldn't.
Yeah.
You'd make the most of it.
Yeah.
And so it forces you to prioritize
Right.
what's really important. Let go of the distractions. Let go of the things that are stressing you out.
So instead of fearing death, we can actually use it as a tool
Exact.
to clarify our values,
Yes.
to motivate us to live more fully.
It's this beautiful reminder that every day is a gift
Yeah.
that we should make the most of.
It's a total mind shift.
Yeah.
It's like he's asking us to reframe our entire perspective on life and death.
Totally.
And it's actually quite liberating
It is.
in a way.
When you let go of that fear,
Yeah.
you can really embrace life.
Okay, wow, that's a powerful message. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already,
We have.
but I know there's still more to explore in the book. What else should we dive into?
Well, he also talks about this thing called the feedback loop from hell, which I think a lot of people can relate to. It's that cycle of negative thoughts and feelings.
Oh, yeah. I've been there.
that can be really hard to break free from.
Yeah, it's like you get in this spiral.
Yes.
And one negative thought leads to another.
And it just keeps going.
Yeah, and before you know it, you're like in this pit of despair.
Exactly. And the more you dwell on those thoughts, the more you kind of ruminate.
Uh-huh.
The worse you feel, and the harder it is to get out of it.
Yeah.
You're just trapped in your own mind.
So how do we escape that loop?
Well, his advice is don't try to fight those thoughts. Don't try to suppress them.
Okay.
Don't pretend they're not there. Acknowledge them, notice them, accept that they're there, and then gently shift your attention to something else.
So it's not about pretending to be positive all the time. It's about,
Managing it.
yeah, learning to manage those negative thoughts
Yes, in a healthy way.
in a healthy way.
Yeah. It's about mindfulness.
Okay, so what are some practical things that we can do to redirect our attention when we find ourselves in one of those spirals?
So he suggests a few things.
Okay.
One is physical activity. Go for a run, go to the gym, do some yoga,
Get out of your head.
get out of your head, get into your body.
Yeah.
Another is to do something creative, write, paint, play music.
Oh, I like that.
Anything that kind of sparks your interest.
Channel that negative energy into something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes all you need to do is talk to somebody.
Right.
Vent your frustrations.
Yeah, just getting it out.
Can really help.
So it's about having those healthy coping mechanisms.
Absolutely.
Right.
And the more you practice them, the easier it gets.
Okay, so we've talked about managing our inner world.
Yeah.
What about our outer world? Like, how do these ideas apply to like our relationships and our work and, just our interactions with the world around us?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways from the book is that we need to be more intentional about who we surround ourselves with.
Oh, so it's not just about choosing our values and our struggles. It's also about
It's about choosing your people.
choosing your people wisely.
Because the people we spend our time with, they have a huge impact on us.
Yeah. Our thoughts, our emotions, our well-being.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that we often take for granted.
Yeah, we just kind of fall into our routines.
Yeah.
And we don't always stop to think like, are these people actually good for me?
Are they supportive? Are they inspiring?
Yeah, are they lifting you up? Or are they bringing you down?
Yeah, and it's so easy to just get caught up in that,
It is, yeah.
But he's encouraging us to be more discerning
Or discerning.
about the people that we allow into our lives.
Find those people who challenge you to grow.
Yeah,
Make you feel good about yourself.
and who share your values.
Exactly.
So it's not about cutting people out of our lives
Right.
who aren't perfect or
Mm.
who don't always agree with us.
It's about being mindful
yeah,
of the energy that you exchange with people.
right, and making sure that it's a positive exchange
Positive exchange.
for both people.
And being willing to walk away if it's not.
Yeah, and that can be really hard, especially if it's a long-standing relationship
It is. It could be really tough.
with a friend or family.
It is.
But sometimes it's necessary.
Sometimes you got to do it
Yeah.
for your own well-being.
Yeah, create that distance
Yeah.
from people who are bringing you down.
And it's not about being mean or judgmental or anything like that.
Right.
It's about protecting yourself,
Yeah.
protecting your energy.
And creating space for those healthy relationships to come in.
Exactly.
This is so insightful.
That's
I'm
what you-
realizing how much power we actually have
You do.
to shape our own lives.
You do.
It's not just through our thoughts and actions, but through the relationships we choose.
Absolutely. That's the point of the book.
Yeah.
He wants you to feel empowered,
Yeah.
to own your life,
Mm.
make those choices that align with what matters to you,
Yes.
and create a reality that is true to yourself.
So we've gone through some pretty, profound stuff.
Yeah.
We,
Yeah.
Accepting death can make us appreciate life more. This whole idea of choosing your struggles, choosing your values. But
Yeah.
what I really love about this book
Yeah.
is it's not all just theory.
Right.
It actually gives you some tools.
It's practical.
Yeah.
You can use it.
You can actually use it in your daily life. So
Exactly. That's what sets it apart from a lot of self-help stuff out there.
yeah.
It's not just about, feeling good. It's about actually, doing the work
Yeah.
to create a better life.
So let's get into some of those practical tips.
Okay.
Where should we start?
So we've already talked about some of the strategies, right? Like identifying your values,
Yeah.
learning to say no, reframing your relationship with failure. But I think it's worth revisiting those
Okay.
and looking at, okay, how can you actually put these things into practice?
Yeah, that's great. So let's start with values.
Okay.
We talked about how important it is to identify what truly matters to you. How do you actually go about figuring that out?
So One of the exercises that he talks about that can be really helpful is to actually write down
Okay.
your top 5 values.
Yeah. Okay.
And he emphasizes that these should be values that really resonate with you, not what you think you should have or what sounds good. So it's about being really honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And digging deep.
And this might take some time, right?
It might.
To really uncover those things that really motivate you.
Absolutely.
And give you that sense of purpose.
It's a process, yeah. And then once you have that list, it's about, okay, now how do I actually make choices that reflect these values?
How do you live in alignment?
How do you live in alignment? Yeah.
With your values?
Now, every time you make a decision, you're asking yourself, does this support my values or does it contradict them?
Yeah, so like if one of my top values is, let's say, creativity.
Okay.
But I'm in a job that feels stifling and like just totally uninspiring.
Right.
Then it might be time to consider a career change. Or at least find ways to incorporate more creativity into my existing role.
Right. It's about being willing to make those changes.
Yeah.
Even if they feel kind of scary or uncomfortable at first.
To create a life that feels more you.
More you. Okay, I love that. All right, let's talk about saying no.
Yeah.
We all know how important boundaries are.
Right.
Right? But actually doing it is hard.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for getting better at saying no?
So one thing that's been helpful for me is to practice saying no in low-stakes situations. So maybe it's declining an invitation to something you don't really want to go to.
Okay.
Or saying no to taking on that extra task at work when you're already feeling overwhelmed.
So like building up that no muscle.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Start small and then you can work your way up.
To those bigger things.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about, like, what do you say?
Yeah, you don't need to over-explain.
Yeah.
A simple thank you, but I can't commit to that right now.
That's perfect. Is usually enough.
Yeah, and what if people like push back or try to make you feel guilty?
Then you really got to stand your ground.
Okay.
You have a right to say no, and you don't need to apologize for it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, let's talk about failure. So we talked about how Manson, wants us to really change our relationship with failure.
Reframe it.
Yeah.
See it as a learning opportunity.
Yeah, but how do we actually do that? Because it's easy to say, don't be afraid of failure.
It's harder to actually do it.
But it's so much harder to actually embrace it when you're in it.
So one thing that can be helpful is to keep what he calls a failure journal.
Oh, I like that.
So every time you experience a setback or you screw up, write it down.
Okay.
But instead of just dwelling on all the negativity, try to identify, what did you learn?
Oh, yeah.
What could you do differently next time?
So you're turning those failures into data points?
Exactly. You're using them to inform your future decisions.
I love that. Okay, so we talked about values, we talked about setting boundaries, we talked about embracing failure.
Right.
Any other, key takeaways from the book?
Well, I think the biggest one is that, it's not enough to just read this stuff.
Yeah.
You have to actually use it.
We have to put it into action.
Put it into action, yeah.
So it's not about just the knowledge. It's about, okay, what are those tangible steps
Exactly.
you can take to make changes?
And again, they don't have to be huge.
Right.
Just start with small, consistent actions.
Small, consistent actions that are aligned with your values. So, for example, if one of your values is health, but you've been neglecting your physical well-being,
Right.
start by going for a 20-minute walk every day.
Yeah. Or just adding more veggies to your diet.
Just little tiny changes.
Little things that can add up to big results.
Like you can stick to, yeah.
Over time, yeah.
I love that. It takes the pressure off of having to do everything at once.
Absolutely.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Yes. And being patient with yourself.
Yeah.
Change takes time.
It does. Well, this has been so insightful. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on self-improvement.
Me too.
And I feel like I actually have some tools now.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of this book, is that it's not about, becoming apathetic or whatever. It's about choosing what to care about.
Right.
And then actually living
a life that reflects that.
that reflects those values. Yeah.
It's about taking ownership,
Yes.
embracing the mess,
Yes.
and focusing on what truly matters.
That's it.
That's it. All right. Well, to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
on this deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck. We hope you found it insightful.
And useful.
And useful, yeah. And remember,
Life is messy.
life is messy.
You're not special.
You're not special.
And that's okay.
And that's okay.